Welcome to the Mom as Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here. Mama's Well. Yes, she is. Hey, guys. If this is the first time that you've visited Mom as Well, this is a place where we talk about parenting. My husband and I are raising children that we adopted from foster care, but we also raised 3 biological sons. And this is really just a place about learning who we are through the process of parenting. And so it's, while parenting our daughters it's created some new challenges. We had plenty of challenges when we were raising our 3 boys and still do. And so if what I'm learning, I know what I'm learning is that parenting kids requires a reparenting of myself. And so I'm just kind of living through that in front of this camera, and sometimes that's really scary. So if that's something that you're interested in, you're in the right place, and I'm glad you're here. Second thing I wanted to say is thank you for all of the reviews. And that was a really special weekend to get to read everything that you've said. My sweet 9-year-old daughter, Trinity, I looked this morning and I had a review from her. And it says, "Mother, you're doing a good job." So I hope you'll go check out her review. She's pretty quick on my phone. I didn't even know she left that, but I appreciated that, Trinity. So today I want to talk about something that I don't have statistics on this, but I think probably impacts just about everybody walking on this planet at some point in their life. And that is addiction, chemical dependency, all kinds of addictions. So addiction doesn't have to just be to a drug or to alcohol. It can be to behaviors, even thinking. And so I think that, it impacted me from before I even have memory. And it's impacted my husband. It's impacted just about everyone I know. And I think when we're raising children who have come from adversity, it really is, there is a really strong chance that they may struggle in this area. So I think it's important that we talk about it and that we know, ways that we can potentially, prevent. And then what do we do if we think that our kid is struggling? And then what is the role of connection in all that? So while I am no expert at all, but I have had experience, there are plenty of experts in this area. And today I brought in one that I think you're going to really enjoy. I've enjoyed every conversation I've had with this man. Adam Oshkosh Bagosh Bertoch. Adam Bertoch. Thank you for coming. And I know I'm going to let you tell a little bit about yourself, but what I do know about you is that you are a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and you are a licensed family and marriage therapist. Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Licensed marriage and family therapist. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little bit, because I don't want to mess anything up besides your name, which I already did.
That's all right.
So tell us a little about yourself.
Okay. So there's the licenses there that kind of credential me and make you think that I have powers, which I probably don't have, but that's all right. The credentials are there and they are important to me. Marriage and family therapist, chemical dependency counselor, there's a lot beneath that for me. So there's a story behind that and how I got into it and kind of the path and journey I took. Just so everyone kind of knows me, I'm also a dad. So I've got this title of chemical dependency counselor, marriage and family therapist. I'm also a husband, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a friend. And I like to balance out as many of those titles as I can because I fit in each one of those at different times. And even when I'm in the room with someone being a therapist, there's lots of times that my dad is my dad instinct is activated. There's lots of times that my son, all of these other different things that I find myself being, my identity, show up in the room, and I use those. I use those with people because I want to be a human being also. That's great that I'm your therapist, but I want to be a human being. Please let me do that.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, okay, so some of I guess, my story, professional experience, it starts back in, probably, I'll go all the way back to high school, and we'll spend an hour just talking about me, right?
Yay.
But in high school, I took the psychology class, and prior to that, I've always been interested. Oh man, from when I was a child, even one of the stories my mom tells everybody about me, and that I've heard, hundreds of times, is this. I came back from school at some point. I'm guessing, I think the time frame might have been even kindergarten or first grade or something like that. And she says I came home from school, and she was just kind of asking me about my day, and I had this confused look on my face. And I just said, I don't understand why people are mean. And I was like, I was really grappling with this question. Why are people mean? I had these why questions. I had so many of those. And I think most kids do around certain ages, but this was one of them that I got stuck on. And I feel like from that point forward, I asked myself that probably every day, every moment of every day. Why are people the way that they are? And this came from a place where I was trying to understand. I'm guessing, I don't even remember if someone was mean to me that day or if I witnessed someone being mean to someone else. It's also striking to me that it took me going to school to recognize that. I feel like that's props to my family, to my parents maybe, like, good job, guys. I didn't know what mean was until I left the home. So I've just looked at that and kind of thought about it over the years. But I think that's part of why I got into the field of psychology into college years, and then that expanded into this internship. So this first internship where I get my feet on the floor in actual psychological work was at this adolescent sex offender unit in Idaho. And a lot of these kids were foster kids of the system that had been perpetrated against, that were re-perpetrating on their foster families' kids and other things like that. I just got thrown into this world that was really challenging for me. Personally, because of the different experiences that I had growing up. Some of them I kept very close to heart and have shared with very few people. But because of that, I went into that area with all of these kids that were hurt, that were hurting others. And I think what I really learned right off the bat, and it's really benefited me specifically with the work that I do with addiction, is how to have compassion for mean people, or people that I considered to be mean. Can I relate to them? I felt like I should. I was raised in a Christian household, believing in certain principles of forgiveness and grace, compassion. But I was trying to figure this out, especially with this population. I'm like, man, these are bad things that people are doing. How do I have compassion for them to help them? And I had other colleagues, other students with me at the time in that internship, and some of them couldn't grasp that one. They couldn't figure it out. And some of them left the internship, some of them stayed. But that's where my journey into psychology started. And from there forward, it only got more grand and expansive. I went from that internship to a hospital, working in a hospital in Utah. And this was a behavioral health hospital, so this was like what you would see as an inpatient or residential facility. They too had several, adolescents there that had been in the system, where there was a lot of abandonment, attachment issues there as well. And there was a lot of violence, a lot of trauma in that unit. I saw the world of managed healthcare for the first time in a very real way. I saw the flaws of managed healthcare. I saw basically everybody trying to do their best, and it's still not working out for a lot of the kids, for a lot of the people involved in that. So grasping that and dealing with coming home from that time at that time frame, I forgot to introduce the fact that I got married before that. Oh. Whoops. Sorry, wife. So my wife, Cassie, we had met in my undergraduate program there at BYU, Idaho. And then when we moved over and lived with her parents for a time, and that's where I was working at this job, and I'd come home late. My daughter eventually was born, my first daughter, Bailey, and she's now 7, so I've got 3. I'm a father 3 times. I've got a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. They're all girls. It's a blast. I'm okay with it. People are always like, "You want a boy or something like that?" I'm just like, I've got like 10 nephews. Like I've got boys, and if I want to have some guy time, I've got some resources there. But I'm loving being the dad of girls right now.
That's beautiful.
So this story kind of continues on, and I started seeing a lot of themes. I started seeing a lot of attachment, a lot of drug use, a lot of addiction, a lot of what's kind of vaguely referred to as broken homes. I'm not sure that there's really any home that doesn't have brokenness to it. But these homes were what most people would consider what they mean when they say broken homes. And then moving from there, I worked at a family therapy clinic in Lubbock. I was working on my graduate degree at that point, working more towards my training. So I started from psychology, which is pretty individualistic, pretty looking at each individual. And then I branched over into more of a systemic view of mental health, which is where marriage and family therapy comes in line. The title marriage and family therapy seems pretty exclusive to just marriages and families, but really what it is a systemic approach to mental health. So relational dynamics of systems large and small, seeing even the individual as a system. So this was a very different philosophy or theory lens, I would say, of seeing people compared to what psychology was providing me. So I had this blend of psychology, which was very individualistic and had great theories, great work in understanding, how people work, which was this question I had since I was a little kid. And then now I've got this systemic view. And with that systemic view, part of the program at Texas Tech was addiction. So then they said, well, how do we see addiction? We're starting to see mental health within a system. How do we see addiction within a system? What does that change? What does that bring up? What types of interventions would that change or form? So then I had the family therapy clinic, and I worked in juvenile justice system in Lubbock. Saw a lot of the criminalization of drugs and the effects of that on a lot of different socioeconomic status individuals and families who had very severe limitations. Financially had very severe limitations, really probably across the board. We could list probably like all of the different areas that we might have, limitations, and some of them had all of them. So pretty intense things there. Then I come back over here. I'm this like grad student, just graduated. I'm starting off with my license, and part of the license process is you have a supervisor, a therapist yourself. And during that therapeutic process, you gain hours and hours and hours of experience. You process those hours 2-3 times. So if I'm sitting down with you in the room and it's 45 minutes, I'm processing that, multiple times.
With your supervisor.
With my supervisor. And I'm sitting there saying, what happened to me in the room? And I get to say my side of the story, which is not, that should, I think, continue as you continue when the supervisor is no longer that role there. But I was able to really understand myself in some fundamental ways that I think really connect to today's topic, but also just to your podcast, and understanding the work of a parent, the work of families, of every individual in the family, the work that our children, our young daughters have. They have limitations on what they can do with their work, but there are responsibilities that are very much their own, even when they're very young. So that's some of my background with addiction, with families, with systems, and understanding that we're never not in relation with someone, including ourselves or others. So
it reminds me of a term I learned years ago. I read a lot of this man's book, Dr. Not Dan Allender. Who did the intervention series. Jeff Van Vonderen.
Okay.
Do you know Jeff Van Vonderen?
Not
No?
by name,
Okay.
but the intervention series.
No,
Yeah.
I might be mixing up some stuff. I might be mixing. Jeff
Someone will
Van
correct
Vonderen,
it. It's all right.
I think, is where I learned this term, but he says that addiction is a family disease,
Yes.
and so I think that's what you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the previous kind of look at it, addiction in general, was that there was just this, and Dr. Brad Reedy, so he speaks to this, I mean, extensively, but the background and history of addiction viewed it as a complete moral failing of a person, viewed it as a complete choice. It's like we gave everybody the same opportunities and same choices. Not true, but we gave all of them those opportunities, and they chose weed or they chose alcohol over connecting with people. Like, what a horrible person to do that. It started, and it's still, I think, pervasive, a view that we always have to kind of get past with somebody that's suffering and in pain. I mean, there's some anger there. It's like, come on, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's tough.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That kind of, I love Dr. Reedy. You and I have connected over him, and I've shared a lot of stuff from his books. Sometimes I pretend he's sitting here, and I'll say, "Oh, hi, Dr. Reedy. It's nice to see you. Let's hear what you have to say." And then I read straight from his book.
That's awesome. He's a great person to have around in real or in pretend.
So,
Yeah.
but he talks about that, about addiction not being a moral issue. So, so what, I mean, you just said your thoughts on that. Like, so where does, I mean, man, I'm about to ask you a really large question. I don't even know that I should ask it, but where do you see this coming from? Like, what I also think about, I'm going way off rails here because what you've been saying, I'm just like immersed and engrossed in where you're leading us. But, you think in your families, because if this is a family disease, you have one child who seems resilient, and you have another child who just gets sucked clean in. What?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, that's, I ask myself that one a lot. I hear that one a lot. Especially because when you're looking at families and you're looking at the system approach of it, you sit there and you say, look, I've got this dad and this mom. And then you look over at your sibling and you're saying, I've got this dad and this mom. We both call them dad. We both call them mom. Because we both call them dad and we both call them mom, surely they're the same, right? No. Nope. It's not. And there's lots of things that feed into that. So it's part of the question starts off with an assumption. And the assumption is that all of the siblings share the same parents. And I stop it before we move on from there. I stop it at that part of the question. Is that true? Why don't we question that one? Is it true that each of the kids have the same parent? I don't think that's true. There's an illusion that happens because they're called the same word to us. And I love language. I pay so much attention, or I try to pay attention to language, because language typically is kind of the first example of a thought being brought out of us. And it's kind of like, now it can interact with things. When it's in our head, it's just kind of there, and we kind of interact maybe inside our head a little bit, but when we put it out, now it's up for, trial. And that part of the question, are they the same parent? So just think to yourself, as an individual, as a person, has there ever been a moment in your life where one day you thought on any particular topic, you pick a topic, okay? Even your favorite color. And maybe, those who are listening can already see where I might be going with this. You have a favorite color one day. Maybe 10 years later, I ask you, what's your favorite color? I feel personally, because this is a very common question for my daughters, what's your favorite color, Daddy? Mm-hmm. This is how they judge whether or not they can relate to me or connect to me sometimes, because I share the same favorite color as my middle daughter. I was also a middle child. Kind of weird. I don't know what's going on there. But I liked green for the longest time. Green's my favorite color, sure. I've changed over the years. I still feel pressure to tell her my favorite color is green because I want to provide consistency as a parent, because I've got this whole other script that says you have to be consistent, you have to be stable and structured, secure. So if you're not, they won't be secure and everything will fall apart. I digress. Okay. But so I've got a favorite color that might change. If any part of you has changed, even within a week's time, our preferences can change. In a day, in a 24-hour cycle, my preference can change. It can shorten even from that. So that alone, the fact that I can change on what we might say aren't really fundamental things like favorite color, preferences, things like that, because I can change, that suggests to me that if a parent can change in those ways within a day, certainly within 10 years, and depending on the spacing of the children that you have, you're not the same parent.
Right.
You can't be.
Yeah.
The world has asked different things of you since that moment that you gave birth to your first child. Different things have come up, different challenges, you've had different thoughts. So the illusion, and we suffer from the illusion, I think, every day, because you look in the mirror and you look similar enough. You're probably the same. And if you weren't, it'd be too chaotic if you were fundamentally different, of course, every hour by hour. If I had completely different thoughts or that we would throw into the realm of mental health. But I guess what I'm saying is, back to your question, that's the first part. So let's say we dismantle the first part of that question. So now the question becomes slightly different. We're not assuming anymore that all of the children have the same parent. And I didn't even get into the fact that each of the kids is their own person, which is another possible assumption of that question, is that we're all the same as siblings.
Yeah, we're not robots.
No. We wish we would be, because it'd make this problem easier to solve.
Yeah.
If we saw it that way.
Yeah. But we're not a scientific experiment.
No, not at all. That is a lot of the process of how we figure out things, though. We do a lot of trial and error. There's so much flexibility built into who we are, built into our identity, that we don't really, we certainly wouldn't talk about it. We're probably not aware of it most of the time. And I wouldn't say that your question was silly. I think it's a safe question. It's a question that brings security. And it actually stems from a lot of the security that we found in being children, I think. You have to believe certain stabilities and structures are present in order to feel safe.
Yeah.
Even if they aren't there. Yeah. Even if they really aren't there. So even if your parent is like everybody and is imperfect, has very specific quirks, limitations, flaws, things that they cannot do, not just things that they won't do. Those are there too. Right. So with the variableness, we ask slightly different questions, and resiliency is a really difficult one to talk about. I think it gets more into the question of a very age-old question about environment, nature versus nurture and all of that.
Yeah. So if we know that it's about, and this is, the first thing I want to say to everybody right now is like what you've just said several times now is humanness. Like you want to be human, and we are human, and there's no way around it. We just are.
Yeah.
And so we're not always going to be able to respond like we would like, or like we read in the book yesterday that we want to respond, or whatever. So just being aware of that and offering grace to ourselves is key. But what is, though? Let's talk about what is that, like. I think Dr. Reedy calls it the soup we're cooked in, but I was thinking of a Petri dish. Like, what is that space? Obviously, so if we're raising kids from foster care and addiction, like many, and I don't know the statistics, but addiction and substance abuse is a huge part of why most kids come into care.
Oh yeah.
A lot of parents they're not neglectful and violent often when they aren't using substances. You know what I'm saying? So there's this huge piece of that. What does that look like?
Oh man. So the Petri dish and understanding foster care, but just in being, and I do want to stick with that human being thing, because you talked about even just giving yourself grace or giving yourself compassion and forgiving yourself. There's sometimes that I think even that approach is still not grasping exactly the humanity that is us. So it's it's almost like when we forgive ourselves or give grace to ourselves, we're saying, sorry, I'm not perfect right now. Otherwise I will be. So it's almost like sometimes even just the act of rewarding ourselves with forgiveness, with permission to be human, is still not fully embracing humanity. If we embraced the fact that we are who we are, I don't think that we would even look at, forgiveness and grace would even look slightly different even. I think it would be important still to acknowledge that we are disappointed, that we have done less than what we want to do. That still would need to be addressed. But to accept that I'm a human being, I would say I wanted to do that. I was either unable to do that or I missed the mark. Better luck next time. And this is just kind of surface level, vague talking disappointments. There's some really core disappointments that happen in life, things like trauma, that aren't quite bummer statements. That bummer, I'll do better next time, doesn't really quite cut it. So when we go into the Petri dish, when we understand addiction, humanity, disappointment, you start seeing some of these patterns. You start seeing that kids why are they in foster programs in the first place? We could say the word failure. We could say that there's been failures from their parents. There likely was failures from the parents. But then when we get to the place, all this comes back to me to what I learned in that first experience in my internship in understanding compassion towards humanity. Because that's what anyone, foster parent, the original parents, you've got the foster parent, you have the foster kid, all of them, what they need is compassion. There's so much harm that happens because we are all perpetrators and we're all victims. Every single person is, because that's what it takes to learn. To learn, we have to perpetrate harm against others.
Wow.
To learn, we have to be victims of other people's perpetrations as they learn. And I hate that. There are times that I actually hate what I just said because of the pain that's involved in it, because of the grief and the loss that's involved in it. But as much as I hate that, I think that's what's going on. That's kind of what I'm seeing. People are learning, and part of learning involves, unfortunately, a great deal of pain and loss.
Yeah, I almost I'm already knowing that when I come back and listen to this again, like what you just said is really deep. And I know this happens to me all the time, but I sit here and listen to you, and I think I grasp what you're saying, and then I go back, and it almost brings tears to my eyes because I don't want to hurt anyone. And yet I know I do it all the time.
Oh, no, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's and what you're saying is it's necessary. Is that what you're saying?
It is. It's necessary. I think the thoughts that I have, even hearing that reflected back to me from you, the two words I would really focus on at that point, because we are learning and we will hurt people. And I think that's one of the hardest things for me is when I have hurt people. I can almost get over when people hurt me easier than I can when I harm somebody else. The important thing that I've learned for myself and for a lot of other individuals is that the difference between intentional and unintentional harm. There is a difference. We sit there, and when you look back at the way in which you've harmed people, there may have been some level of intention behind it, but it's more likely the case that our learning involves the unintentional harming of other people. And that's different. There's a different, now to the person being harmed, I'm not even entirely sure that subtlety matters to them, because pain is pain. It hurts. You hurt me.
Right.
So when the child looks up at us and we hurt their feelings, what we can say if it wasn't intentional, I know it brought up tears for you. I've had tearful moments with that as well. Times where I felt like I couldn't make it back from that. I'm irredeemable. I've harmed people. There was years of my life that I hid away, that I isolated, and that I did not engage socially because of the risk that I knew would happen. I would hurt someone eventually. Inevitably, I would. So I've changed my answer to that. I've re-engaged. But back to this child that says, you've hurt me, what we can recognize within ourselves is, was this intentional or unintentional? And that at least helps us. I'm not entirely sure it helps the child, but if I could look into my child's eyes, if I could look into my daughter's eyes and she says, you hurt my feelings, I would say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Or even if I didn't mean to do that, then that might not make sense. But if I said, I don't want to hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I hurt you. And this could be over the smallest thing. And it has been with my daughters, like they'll say the most ridiculous things hurt them. And I can sit there and go like, that's ridiculous.
Don't say
and
that.
I'm going to tell you how ridiculous you are. But I don't. I just hold it back and I just say like, I'm so sorry. I don't want to hurt you. And then I prove to them that I don't want to hurt them in that moment. I embrace them. I see I'm not hurting you. If they're ready for the embrace, sometimes they're not. They need to feel a bit more. But the next time, at least they have that dialogue. Like, Dad is capable of hurting me. This is true. He's also capable of being aware of himself, and he can hear me. And I think that's the most important part.
Absolutely. It is absolutely the most important. I used to say to people, because my parents could not be with anything that hurt, ways that they hurt me. They just couldn't be with it.
No.
And I used to just say, if only, I would say this to my therapist, but if like, it would only take 1 minute of them saying they see my hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Just 1 minute of them seeing my hurt. That's all I would ever need, I wanted them to see my hurt so badly. And I think, if our audience might be sitting here going, I thought we were going to talk about addiction. I think we are.
Oh, we yeah, if you're wondering if we're talking about addiction, it does seem like we've strayed.
Yeah.
This is absolutely everything to do about addiction.
Can you draw that back like
Sure.
super clear? Because I know we are, because I know how that feels to not, go ahead. I'm going to be quiet now and let you.
No, that's good. I'm so happy you brought that in, because there's probably someone listening right now. It's just like, what is even happening?
Yeah.
So let me help you. One person that's saying that. It could be all of you. I don't know. But anyway, let's connect the dots, okay? What we just talked about here is that we're all perpetrators. We're all victims. It's hard to see yourself as a perpetrator. And trust me, I know that. I've sat with a lot of people that their whole identity has been marked by that word. They are the perpetrator, and they are never seen as the victim. And what happens? They continue to perpetrate because they're never given a victim space. So if we're all perpetrators, we're all victims, we're all learning, part of the learning process involves great risk. If I harm you, intentionally or unintentionally, if there's intentional harm and you can prove intent, you need to stay away from that person first off. I just want to get that message out there. Even if you forgive them and you allow them to learn their lessons, learn your lessons with someone else because you have intentionally harmed me. Okay. So I want to clarify that. We're not okay to just be punching bags and be beaten up and to take this just because Adam said we're learners and other people are learners. Let's get beat up. No. Okay. Wanted to clear that out. So now when we connect this, what is addiction? Well, first, I don't really like defining things.
Okay.
I like to keep it as vague as possible. But I will say the way that this would relate to addiction is connection. Connecting with another human being. What threatens our connection with another human being is also what feeds addiction.
What threatens our connection with another human being is what feeds addiction. What is that? We want to know.
Great. What we just talked about. Hurting other people. If I find that I am a perpetrator and that I am I can't reconcile the fact that I've harmed somebody else, you might do what I did. You might step out of life. You might die before you're dead. This is called depression. So you might step away from things. You might not take any more risks because why would I burden somebody else with my existence? I'm burdened by my existence. Why would I do that? I don't want to make anybody suffer. Well, this is believing a lie that you can live without suffering. But how do we work past that? I don't know. Drugs seem to do the job real quick. It doesn't take very long after you swallow a pill, after you take a drink of alcohol, after you watch some porn, after you cut yourself, after you physically beat yourself up, to displace the greatest difficulty, which is seeing yourself as being capable of being a perpetrator, of being, whatever term you use, evil, bad, less than whole. But disappointing others and being disappointed by them could be another way that we frame this as well. And if there's one key that's going to help anyone that struggles with addiction, but also just with any kind of emotional pain, it would be to understand how to more effectively disappoint other people and be disappointed by other people. So in that sense, you disappointed your daughter and maybe even yourself because you were unable in that moment to be who you wanted to be. That's a disappointment of self that you have to deal with now.
Right.
It's just crazy how much we have to deal with when just small things go up like this. So now we have to deal with, how do I forgive myself for not being who I want to be? And then we look at your daughter who's disappointed because she doesn't have now a safe emotional space to be able to feel what she needs to feel without it triggering some other dialogue with you. So then I feel like if we broke this down and we were perfect, we could say in that moment, I really want to be whole and present with you, daughter. I want to be a good mom. I want to provide, this and that. And we run through this whole list. And then, we calmly, collectedly run through this list. And then we say, for whatever reason, I can't do that for you right now. I don't think I got enough sleep. I haven't eaten in a while. I'm also thinking about, how mad I am at your dad about, not taking out the trash this morning. I've got all these other things running through there. But I'm sorry, I can't be who you need me to be right now. I'm going to take some time and see if I can get there. And when I come back, I can give you some of that space. No parent in the world is going to be able to do that one. So that's the learning. So now instead, what we have to do now is learn retrospectively. We look back at that moment. We feel some mommy guilt, some daddy guilt, whatever it is. And we say, all right, let's try this again. And we apologize. If there's something that we wanted to provide, maybe we can apologize to that, and it can free us up from that guilt too, and just say, I really wanted to be someone that could feel that way. Now, if they're a 3 or 4 year old, this kind of conversation is completely different. But
It's just out the wall. So, okay. So bring our train back here.
Yeah.
We're talking about addiction. All of these things connect. What you're saying is that we originally, the original question was, what's that Petri dish like? And I think that's what we've been talking about.
Yeah. Humanity.
Yeah.
The Petri dish is wild, and it's broad, but the Petri dish of addiction and connection would look something along the lines of understanding what is keeping me from connecting with you, what's keeping you from connecting with me, and then both of us work on that separately.
Because otherwise, when we don't feel connected, we disconnect with what you call depression or whatever, and then we medicate that with whatever the addiction.
Oh yeah, yes. So then what the addiction offers us is a synthetic of what the real connection with a human being would be. So you've got the addiction piece of it, and it does this so well. Here's the reason why addiction is so addicting, right? Why the substance has such a draw, is it can provide for us what no human being can, and that's dependability, consistency.
Wow.
That's why we get hooked. And some people get hooked to that. Some people have a higher tolerance for being maybe understanding of humanity. Where that comes from, if I knew, I'd give it to every single person. I think it's a work that a lot of us have to do. Some have to do it more than others. But there's some people that you meet that are just more gracious in other people's learning curves. And there's some who are not gracious at all. There's some people that have 3-strike rule. There's some people that have no strike rule at all. There's some people that say, strike, what's a strike? Keep learning. So where that comes from, I'm not entirely sure. But I think that has something to do with it. The understanding of connection, people are going to be making mistakes. They're going to be disappointing us. What do we do at the crossroads of someone being not dependable to us? And that's the biggest hurdle that someone with addiction has to get over. When you obtain sobriety, obtain meaning when you can be away from whatever that addictive substance or behavior is for even a moment, you are met with disappointment. It's one of the first introductions you have on the way out of the door of addiction. You open the door, you cross the foot across the threshold, and disappointment happens. And your life is saying, what are you going to do?
So when we can learn, when we can accept imperfect selves and imperfect other,
Yeah.
then we have a less propensity to need the perfection of the dependability of the substance.
Yeah. I would say this is a simplification, but I do believe that this is a core part of it. And when I say connection, we're talking about self and other, but there's a whole part of connection with self that has to happen
Yeah.
before I can connect with another even. Now, I don't know if I want to say before, because I think some of the only ways that I can really understand who I am is by you being who you are.
Got it.
So that's part of systems theory, is that nobody's ever existing in a vacuum. No one's ever by themselves. Even if you are by yourself, you're with yourself and your thoughts, right? Most people even will say that in their languaging of it. Mm-hmm. So that's where it's key to understand, if I disappoint you, what do I do when I have failed myself?
Yeah.
And if I can understand those things, I can understand what to do when you fail me. I'm not saying that addiction goes away in that moment, but I believe that is the most fertile soil for sobriety, for recovery, for connection.
Say it real clear. What is the most fertile soil for sobriety and recovery? Say that.
It would be understanding how to live with or manage disappointing yourself and disappointing other, being disappointed by another. So the key element, I think, is disappointment. Things not meeting our expectations, we have to do something here. The Serenity prayer, when you look at AA and all these other programs in understanding control, codependency, those are the key elements. I can't change you.
Yeah.
And even past I cannot change you, whether it's an ability or not, I tend to damage you when I try to.
Yes.
And I think I damage me too when I try to.
Yeah. You're really hitting some tender spots for me, because and this kind of leads me to, man, this is one of the most, and this is deep stuff, Adam. You're talking deep stuff, and I really love it. I talked about, I think it was maybe episode 66 or something. I talked about codependency and parenting, and how it shows up. Every morning I read a book called The Language of Letting Go. It's Melanie Beattie.
I love that title.
A year long, like basically codependency. She wrote Codependent No More.
Oh, okay.
She wrote the 12 steps for the codependents, guide to the 12 steps, whatever. But, I have done some work there, and it really, codependency shows up mostly for me in my parenting. And I see, and it's that the word you keep using that's so much better for me now than perpetrator, because perpetrator is so, and I know where that was coming from. It's like we were talking about, that kind of stuff. But as a parent, that word disappointing, just to disappoint my child, especially when my child has been chronically disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So as a parent raising children in care, like, that is the last thing you want to do as a parent, is to let them down. And yet I do, again and again and again. And then I look at their behavior and I think, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I get this right? What's my responsibility in it? And just this morning I was sitting there thinking to myself, it's not all about you, Tara. You're gonna screw up. Kyle's gonna screw up. Like, we are doing the best we can.
Yeah.
And to just be okay with that. That's what she needs me. She needs me to be okay with myself. So that's teaching her how to be okay with herself.
That's absolutely right. You're speaking, and we are speaking to the most terrifying aspect of parenting. I think even outside of parenting, it's terrifying to watch somebody suffer. It's terrifying to think that you're part of it, that you're part of the suffering. Or I want to maybe offer a different way of looking at the benefits of you disappointing your child in the best way you know how. Because that's what I'm asking you to do. I'm not asking you to intentionally go in there, re-traumatize them the way that they were traumatized already and coming into you. What I'm asking you to do is to disappoint them better than they were disappointed before. okay?
Just keep explaining.
And
Got
the
some
way-
explaining to do
all right,
that.
I do have some. Disappoint them better than they were before. And the type of disappointment that people need is the same type of disappointment that you need to play catch with a person. We're throwing a ball back and forth. If I say we need to play catch perfectly, we don't drop the ball, I might walk over and carry the ball to their hands, let it touch their hands, bring it back to my hands. And that's what I think you think is a good mom. That's what I'm hearing you might think is a good parent, is let's prevent them from getting hurt like they were before. Before the ball sat on the ground and no one even said we're playing catch. There was just a ball on the ground. They had to figure out why the heck there's a ball on the ground. Mm-hmm. Do I pick it up? Do I sit on it? Do I poke it with this needle? What do I do? You're already 10 steps ahead of what they had before. You're holding a ball. So the next step is to toss it to them, and it might hit them in the face as they're trying to catch it. It might hit the ground. You might be a horrible thrower. Yeah. Maybe you throw and it doesn't even reach to them. Yeah. It rolls to them and they're just going like, that's not how you do it, Mom. But in order for them, what you're really gifting someone when you're a human being and when you disappoint them better than they've ever been disappointed before is you're letting them participate in the game of catch. And people grow from the disappointment because what the disappointment provides them is responsibility. When I disappoint you, if I let you down, you are now responsible to pick up for my lacking. Sometimes that's painful to you. Sometimes it's so aggravating to you that you don't want to play catch with me anymore. Other times I learn a lot from that responsibility of you dropping the ball. I learn how to grab the ball. I learn how to hold it. And then I try and throw it back to you. Eventually we can get to the point where we can catch a ball pretty well, but I've played catch with a lot of kids. I've played catch with a lot of my friends over the years. And I don't think that I've played catch ever where the ball never hit the ground too early or didn't reach my glove. So the point isn't in pursuing a perfect outcome. The point is to be present with them and play catch.
Yeah.
So you're winning already just by, even if you were to hold the ball, touch their hand with it, bring it back to yours, that's still more interaction than they might have gotten before.
Yeah, that's good. Learning to play catch doesn't mean you always catch.
No, you need to disappoint,
Yeah.
And you're right. You said earlier, it lets them, if they get to see that you're not perfect, it also relieves them from the belief that they have to be.
Yeah, and you're teaching them how to have a redo, how to say you're sorry, how to be human. Mm-hmm. How to be human, which is what we all are.
That's
Check
right.
that box.
That's right. And you don't have to have alcohol to be human. You don't have to have the pills. You don't have to cut. But in order for you to say that statement, you have to cross the threshold of what, people try and understand, why do people keep going back to this drug? Why do they keep going back to this substance, this behavior? They know it's going to hurt them. They know sometimes even that it's deadly, that it could kill them, that it could kill other people. Why do they keep going back to it? Well, if you keep going back to something that you know could kill you or kill others, then it must mean that what you're going to is more important than life or death. So now I have to ask that person the question, why, or what events have happened in your life that have led you to believe that if you don't have this substance, or that having this substance, which could kill people, is better than the risk of living or dying. And we have more conversations about that. I would say maybe 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 out of 10, which no one wants to say that one. I can get proved wrong on 10 out of 10. It has to do with connection.
Did you remember in our email, I referenced a study about the rats.
Yes.
Did you know anything about the study?
I knew about the first study. I hadn't heard much about the more important second study with the rats.
Do you know enough to speak of on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was a really fascinating concept, but I think it kind of drives this point home.
Yeah. Okay. So in the study, basically, in psychology, some of the earlier years and it wasn't even so much studying addiction specifically, but in studying the behavior, but compulsive type behavior. So they have these rats, a rat isolated in a cage, and they had two selections of water to drink from. One was water with heroin. And they said, all right, so let's try and understand what heroin does, the addictive properties of it. Of course, the rats, they choose the heroin water. They really like that stuff. And then they're just like, all right, so what this proves then is that, that substance is really addictive, that we're very similar to rats apparently, and so many other things. But the second study shows up, and this other guy walks in, he says, hey, this is a rat in a cage, and maybe a person in a cage might behave this way or something, but let's make this more real. Let's build a cage that's 200 times the size of that one cage. Let's fill it with other rat companions. Let's fill it with toys, plenty of food, plenty of water, nesting areas where they can have babies and they can get along, areas where they can fight each other, all these toys, rat wheels. Let's fill this up and let's make this different here. And what happened, the hallmark of this study, is they had the same choice of the water with heroin, and they didn't touch the heroin. They didn't go anywhere near it. And even more so than that, when they brought the rats in the previous, type experiment where they were isolated and they did choose the heroin, they put them in there and they stopped choosing the heroin.
Wow.
So you've got so many things that you add more to this, and you think about what did they introduce and why is that a different outcome?
Yeah, because if you and I were in a cage all by ourselves, we might choose the heroin too.
There would be days where heroin's really sounding great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess I'm sitting here, I'm very encouraged today, and I can't wait to go back and re-listen to this, but the power of community, the power of being allowed to be human in a community is the real power. That's the real power. That's the real kryptonite against addiction.
Yeah, that's the real deal. Being able to be seen and be heard. Even if I had an active addiction right now, if I feel like our conversation, I'm being heard, I feel like you listen to me and I feel heard. That makes me feel more complete. It makes me feel like I have a space to exist. I have a purpose. I have a meaning, even just right now. And, someone could offer me all the things in the world right now, but it wouldn't matter because I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel whole. I feel like I'm found.
Wow.
When I sit down with someone and they actually listen to me, and when I'm able to listen to them too, because it feels good when I listen to other people too.
Yeah. I like it. I feel more safe to be human today, to not always catch the ball and to not always throw the ball perfectly, and that we're just in a process of learning. And I'm more aware of some things about myself after this conversation today than I was when we started. What would you say to the person right now who suspects, like I had a Facebook message from somebody yesterday that said, I don't know what to do. My daughter's 15 and she's, I don't know, do I press and ask a bunch of questions? I didn't know the scenario. She didn't tell me much, just that I don't know how to engage with her. She's withdrawing and I just said, well, all I could come to was, well, when I'm 15, I would just want to know that my mom, it would be awesome if my mom would have come to me and said, I'm really concerned about you. I know when I was 15, there was a lot of crazy things going on for me. And maybe that's the only approach I knew to take because I didn't know this person or her daughter or any of the situation. But what happens when you feel your child withdrawing? Maybe you suspect there's some chemical dependency issues going on or some sort of addictive behavior. What's the 911? How do we know when to and what to do?
Okay. That's a good question. And I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that scenario. I'm not even quite there yet with my daughters. I know I will be. So here's what everybody can do with what I'm about to say right now. Okay. What everybody can do with what I'm about to say is they can hold me accountable to this in about 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know the exact answer, but what I really heard in what she was saying, the first thing that stuck out to me was she felt like she was failing engaging with her daughter. And I want to challenge that one first.
Okay.
Okay. Because it sounds to me like she did engage, but she didn't get the outcome she was looking for. And we cannot control the outcomes.
Okay.
As a parent, you can't get what you want from your child. You engaged, though. You approaching her and saying, hey, what's going on? Or, I've noticed, you can do whatever you want to. I won't prescribe every aspect of it, but I'd say already the mommy guilt is showing up.
Sure.
Already it's showing up because you're saying, my daughter's not wanting to have anything to do with me. So because we can't control the outcomes, we can't force, you could try, but you can't really force your daughter to open up and talk with you about what's going on. It leaves the parent in fear, and we have fear responses, or I should say fear reactions, prior to thinking it through. The response usually happens with some thought, but the reaction to the situation is you feel distance from your daughter, and that's sad, and that might trigger other things for you. You might think about how distant you might have felt with your mother at a time in your life, a critical time.
All those things when she was talking to me.
So at that point in time, what you need is to manage your fears and your hurt. You need someone that can hear your fear, hear your hurt, be with you, hold you, help you feel safe in that way. And then the most difficult thing that's required of parents is the admission of the lack of control over outcomes. Don't seek the outcome. In fact, the more you seek the outcome, the more distant you will become from your daughter.
Oh, Adam, I liked you. Now
Okay.
I don't know. No,
I can disappoint you, and we can practice disappointment, right?
Yeah, but I hear you and I believe you. It's
I'm
just
not
a
saying-
hard pill to swallow.
I think most of the times questions like that are asked. It's usually with like, how can I do this?
Right.
Yeah, how can I do this right? How can I get the outcome I want?
Yep.
Your daughter doesn't need you to find an outcome. She needs you. She just needs you. And she needs her. She needs to be heard. She needs to have a place that she knows that she can share. If that's with you, that's what I would hope. If she doesn't want it to be with you, then the gracious thing to her would be to say, it's a surrendering of the parent thing. So if you're feeling lost, if this is an attachment issue you have with your daughter, and I don't say an issue, you love your daughter, you want to have a relationship with her, maybe it's time for your daughter to get some help from a therapist, talk with somebody, have other members of your village, a friend, family member, but you're engaging.
Yeah.
Don't think you're not engaging because the outcome's not what you wanted it to be.
Good point. Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
So you wrap us up on this note here. Wrap us up for
Sure.
offer any last pearls of wisdom and encouragement to people who are out there that are fearful right now, or who are fearful. Really, they're either fearful that they're gonna face this because their genealogy of this child has, or they're right in the middle of it and they're scared.
Oh boy. All right. I hear you. You're scared. All right. Just pay attention to my voice. We don't have to have all the solutions here. And it's okay to be scared because you love somebody and you love someone that's hurting. You love someone that's confusing, that you might not understand or find difficult to relate to. You might even love somebody that is hurtful to you. You might be hurt by the fact that of the choices that you see that they're making. You might not be right in using the word choice. To them, it might not seem like a choice. But I'm here right now for you, for the person that's hurting, and this could be the person who is struggling with addiction. This is for the person who's trying to support someone who's struggling with addiction. It's okay to be scared at accepting the fact that you can't control somebody else that you love. It doesn't feel okay that somebody's suffering and that you can't do anything about it. So you need some comfort, and it's okay for you to go get comfort somewhere. when you can't fix something, when you can't change something that you see is happening, that you can't avoid. It seems you can't avoid. And that's usually what we're talking about and what addiction brings us to most of the time, is it will test your patience. It will also test you fundamentally in understanding what your role is as a human being. What is your job on the planet if you see somebody hurting? And we're taught this very early on. We instinctively have drives, I think, that are spiritual in nature, of not wanting people to suffer and wanting to do something about it, whether that's forcing them to do something they don't want to do, or whether, in any case, you start to lose yourself. The most important thing that you can do for someone is to find yourself. Because if you're both out there drowning, you both drown. And they're terrified, they may be stuck drowning, and you want to say that you can put them on your shoulders, but there's no ground beneath your feet. If you put someone on your shoulders and you're in water and there's no ground beneath your feet, you're going to drown. And then once you drown, they drown. So you have to. It's counterintuitive. It feels selfish. It feels horrible. It feels like failure. The worst part is that it looks like failure. Now you have peer pressure. Now you have people saying you're failing as a parent. So now you imagine what this is. The answer is you're swimming back to shore while your child is drowning. Can you imagine that scene and how much flack you would get if that happened? Or maybe you stay out there in the water as long as you can, you tread as long as you can, and you tell your child, you're just with them. You show them how to tread. You say, follow me this way, this is how you make it back. And they can follow or they cannot follow. And that part you can't control. That's what we're coming to grips with. That is the ultimate message of what addiction is testing in us. It's the worst test. It's difficult. It's scary. The scare doesn't go away. The grief sometimes doesn't go away. The humanity can stay for you. And it's hard work. I wish there was a better answer. I wish I could say that things can be different in that way, but the best possible outcome that you have, the best opportunity for that person you love to find health, to tread water, to swim to shore, is that you show them, that you do it for yourself. Not even to show them, that you just do it for yourself. Because it's their responsibility, their life ultimately, it's their responsibility, and your life is yours. You control, you manage your outcomes, you pursue your outcomes. They have to pursue theirs.
That's good. Whoa, that was a heavy one. It was good. It was very good. Thank you, Adam. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom and your knowledge. And I think it's important. And thank you for staying till the end. If you're still listening, you got that was great at the end. That's probably something maybe you could just keep that handy, that last little bit from Adam, because that's good. I have a friend that I want to make sure listens to that today because she's really struggling right now with her son. And thanks for listening. We will be back next week. Please share this with people, because this is a really hard, this is a struggle that's, it's life-threatening stuff. And that scares us. And so we don't need to be alone with that kind of stuff. And so share this with a friend. Use this as an opportunity to talk about it. Talk, share, be with somebody. Practice listening, practice seeing one another, and give yourself a hug. I'm going to give myself a hug when I get up from here and tell myself that it's okay to be human. I'm a human mama. And I will be good with that today. So thanks, Adam, and we'll see you next week.
Mama's well.
Yes, she